You lost me. But I found myself.
The wrench slipped from my grease-stained fingers as my wife's voice cut through the night air like a rusty blade. I'd been under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Buick for 3 hours, trying to make sense of an engine that wheezed like a dying smoker when Sarah's shriek pierced the relative quiet of our suburban street. "If you don't like that I spend nights with your best friend, then get lost. He's better in every way than you." I straightened up slowly, my back protesting after hours bent over the engine. Through the garage window, I could see Sarah standing in our kitchen, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the fluorescent light. She was gesturing wildly with a wine glass in one hand, her phone pressed to her ear with the other. "My name is Jack Morrison, and I've been fixing cars for 23 years. Started with my dad's old Chevy in our driveway when I was 16. Worked my way up to owning Morrison's Auto Repair on the edge of town. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. Or at least it used to feel that way before my world started falling apart. Everyone knows Dad. She brags about it." That was Emma, our 17-year-old daughter, storming past the garage window with her phone already out, probably ready to broadcast our family's destruction to her 3,000 TikTok followers. Her dark hair, my hair, whipped behind her as she headed for her car. I wiped my hands on my coveralls and walked toward the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of burning leaves and the distant sound of traffic from the highway. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where gossip spread faster than wildfire and lasted twice as long. Through the kitchen window, I watched Sarah pace back and forth, still on the phone. She'd changed since landing that job at Prestige Marketing 3 years ago. Gone were the jeans and sweaters, replaced by power suits and an attitude that could cut glass. Her laugh had become sharper, her smiles more calculated. She'd started working late, going to client dinners, and spending weekends at team-building retreats. I should have seen it coming. Heck, maybe I did see it coming and just didn't want to admit it. "You're pathetic, Jack," she was saying now, having spotted me through the window. 45 years old and still playing with cars like a teenager. Danny's got ambition, Danny's got plans. Danny, my best friend since high school. The guy who'd been my best man, who'd helped me move into this house, who'd taught Emma how to ride a bike when I was working double shifts to keep the shop afloat. I pushed through the back door and Sarah whirled around to face me. Her makeup was perfect as always, but there was something wild in her eyes, something cruel that I'd never seen before. "How long?" I asked quietly. "How long what?" She took a sip of wine, her hands steady despite the alcohol I could smell on her breath. "How long have you been sleeping with Danny?" Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, now you want to pay attention? 6 months, Jack. 6 beautiful, passionate, incredible months. And it's not just Danny." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, your precious little world is about to get a lot smaller." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "See, Danny introduced me to some friends, real friends, people who understand ambition, who understand what it means to want more than this pathetic suburban prison." She turned the phone toward me, and I saw a group chat called Sarah's Liberation Squad. The members list made my blood run cold. Danny Patterson, my supposed best friend, Lisa Chen, who'd been one of Sarah's bridesmaids, Marcus Webb, another groomsman, and Rebecca Stone, Sarah's maid of honor and current best friend. "We've been having the most amazing adventures," Sarah continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "And the best part? We've been documenting everything. Every single thing." I scrolled through the chat, my hands shaking. Photos, videos, messages that made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just the intimate content that destroyed me. It was the mockery. Message after message making fun of me, my work, my appearance, my pathetic attempts to be a man. Danny. "Jack still thinks I'm helping him with the shop's books. Idiot doesn't know I've been helping myself to his wife instead." Lisa. "I can't believe Sarah stayed married to that loser for so long. At least now she knows what real men feel like." Rebecca. "He's too stupid to notice. We could probably do this in his own bed and he'd think Sarah was just having vivid dreams." Marcus. "Next family barbecue is going to be hilarious. I'll try not to laugh when he shakes my hand." The messages went back months. They'd been planning this, orchestrating it, turning my life into their personal entertainment. And the photos, God, the photos, my own bed, my own house, my own life turned into their playground. "You're sick," I whispered. I'm alive, Sarah shot back. For the first time in years, I'm actually alive. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who smells like motor oil and talks about carburetors over dinner? Do you know what it's like watching other women's husbands buy them nice things while you're stuck with someone who considers Applebee's fine dining? I worked 60-hour weeks to give you everything you wanted. You worked 60-hour weeks to hide from the fact that you're boring. She finished her wine and set the glass down hard on the counter. Danny takes me to real restaurants. Marcus bought me this necklace. She touched a silver chain I'd never seen before. Lisa and I go shopping in the city. Rebecca and I get spa treatments. They make me feel like a woman, Jack. When's the last time you made me feel like anything but a roommate? I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to point out all the sacrifices I'd made. But standing there in my grease-stained coveralls, looking at my wife in her designer clothes and professional makeup, I realized she was right about one thing. We'd become strangers. So what now? I asked. Now you have a choice. Sarah moved closer, and I could see the wine had given her courage. You can accept that I'm a grown woman with needs you can't meet, or you can get lost, because I'm not giving up my friends, and I'm not giving up my new life. Your friends? These people were my friends too, Sarah. Danny was in my wedding. Lisa and Marcus were pretending to like you for my sake, she interrupted. Just like I was pretending to be happy with this life for yours. But I'm done pretending, Jack. I'm done settling. I'm done being married to a man who peaked in high school shop class. The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully chosen, perfectly aimed at every insecurity I'd ever had about not going to college, about working with my hands instead of my mind, about being the kind of man who fixed things instead of buying new ones. 20 years, I said. 20 years of marriage, and this is how it ends? With you humiliating me in front of people I trusted? It ends however you want it to end, Sarah replied. But it ends with me being happy, finally. I looked around our kitchen, the kitchen I'd remodeled myself, installing every cabinet and tile with my own hands. The morning sunlight was starting to creep through the windows, highlighting the coffee maker I'd bought Sarah for her birthday, the refrigerator covered with Emma's school photos, and achievement certificates. As you wish, I said quietly. Something in my tone must have gotten through to her because Sarah's confident smirk faltered slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means you want to be happy? You want your friends? You want your new life? I met her eyes, and for the first time in months, I felt perfectly calm. You got it. All of it. I turned and walked toward the garage, Sarah calling after me. That's it? That's your big response? You're just going to slink away like always? I paused in the doorway. No, Sarah, I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. All of it. What the heck does that mean? I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression I'd had in years. It means by morning, you and your friends are going to understand the difference between getting what you want and getting what you deserve. As I walked back to Mrs. Patterson's Buick, I could hear Sarah behind me, her voice rising in pitch as she called Danny. But I wasn't listening anymore. For the first time in months, I had work to do. I spent the rest of the night in my garage, but I wasn't working on Mrs. Patterson's car. Instead, I was doing something I should have done months ago. Thinking, really thinking, not just reacting. My phone buzzed constantly, Sarah trying to call, then Danny, then Rebecca. I let them all go to voicemail. Around 3 a.m, Emma came home and tried to talk to me through the garage door. Dad, I'm sorry about what I said earlier. I don't know, everything's so messed up. It's okay, sweetheart, I called back. Go get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air between us. Emma was 17, old enough to understand what was happening, but young enough to hope it could be fixed. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But whatever happens, it's not your fault, and you're still the best thing your mother and I ever did together. I heard her sniffle, then her footsteps heading back to the house. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not a rage-fueled, burn-everything-down plan, but something surgical, precise. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn that I'd been playing games a lot longer than they had. My first stop was Danny's house. He lived in the same neighborhood, just 4 streets over in a colonial that was slightly bigger than mine. His wife, Jennifer, had left him 2 years ago, taking their kids and half his assets. I'd helped him through the divorce, listening to him complain about lawyers and alimony payments. bringing him beer and pizza when he was too depressed to leave the house. What a fool I'd been. Danny's car was in the driveway, a silver BMW that he'd bought to compensate for his midlife crisis. I'd always thought it was tacky, but I'd kept that opinion to myself because that's what friends do. I parked across the street and waited. At 7:30, right on schedule, Danny emerged in his jogging clothes. He'd started running after the divorce, claiming he needed to get back in shape for the dating scene. Apparently, he'd been more successful than I'd realized. I followed him to Riverside Park, where he did the same 3-mile loop every morning. The park was mostly empty at this hour, except for a few other joggers and dog walkers. Perfect. I intercepted him at the halfway point, stepping out from behind a cluster of oak trees just as he rounded the bend. "Jesus, Jack!" He stumbled to a stop, breathing hard. "You scared the heck out of me. What are you doing here?" "Morning run," I said casually. "Thought I might take up jogging. Try to better myself." Danny's face went through several expressions: confusion, guilt, fear, then a forced smile. "That's great, man. Exercise is really good for stress relief. And you've seemed pretty stressed lately." "Have I?" I stepped closer. "What would I have to be stressed about?" "I don't know. The shop, maybe? Sarah mentioned you've been working a lot of late nights." "Sarah mentioned that, did she? When?" The question hung between us like a trap waiting to spring. Danny's eyes darted left and right, looking for an escape route. Just, in passing, when we run into each other around the neighborhood. "Funny thing about that," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've been looking at Sarah's location history. Seems like you two run into each other quite frequently, almost like it's planned." Danny's face went pale. "Jack, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I showed him a screenshot from Sarah's group chat. Just a lot of lying. He stared at the phone screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he straightened up and crossed his arms. "Okay, fine. Yes, Sarah and I have been seeing each other, but Jack, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly." I put my phone away. "You've been screwing my wife in my bed while pretending to be my friend. You've been laughing about it with other people I trusted. You've been making me look like an idiot for months." "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." I stepped even closer and Danny took a step back. "But here's what you don't understand, Danny. I'm not the same guy I was yesterday. Yesterday's Jack would have punched you in the face and felt better for about 5 minutes. Today's Jack has bigger plans." "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled the same smile I'd given Sarah in the kitchen. "It means you should enjoy your morning run. It might be the last peaceful moment you have for a while." I turned and walked away, leaving Danny standing there in his designer running gear, confusion and fear written all over his face. My next stop was Prestige Marketing, Sarah's workplace. The office was in a gleaming glass building downtown, the kind of place that screamed success to people who needed external validation. I'd been there exactly twice, once for Sarah's company Christmas party, and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the parking lot and made some phone calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Pete Hendricks. Pete and I had gone to high school together, and he'd handled the legal work when I bought the auto shop. He was a good guy, honest and straightforward, which is why I'd never needed him for anything complicated before. "Jack, everything okay? You sound stressed." "I need to know about divorce law, Pete. Specifically, what happens to joint assets when one spouse commits adultery." There was a pause. "Oh crap, Sarah?" "Sarah, with multiple partners. I have proof." "How much proof?" "Photos, videos, text messages going back months, group chat conversations where they discuss it in detail." Pete whistled low. "Okay, that's actually really good for you, legally speaking. New York isn't technically a fault state anymore, but adultery can still affect asset distribution, especially if there's evidence of marital waste or emotional cruelty." "What about joint bank accounts? You have every right to protect marital assets from being squandered. If you can show she's been spending money on the affair, hotels, gifts, whatever, you can freeze the accounts pending divorce proceedings. What about the house? Whose name is on the deed? Both of ours, but I put down the down payment from my business account before we were married." "That helps. Look, Jack, I'm sorry this is happening, but from a legal standpoint, you're in a strong position, especially if she doesn't know you have the evidence yet." "She knows I found out about the affairs. She doesn't know how much evidence I have." "Don't tell her. Don't tell anyone." Bring everything to my office this afternoon, and we'll start building a case. My second call was to my bank. By the time I hung up, all joint accounts were frozen pending review of suspicious activity. Sarah would find out when she tried to use her credit card for lunch. My third call was to Marcus Webb's employer. Marcus worked as a financial advisor at a small investment firm, the kind of place that prided itself on family values and trustworthy service. I didn't identify myself, just asked to speak to the compliance department. "I'd like to report some concerning behavior by one of your advisors," I said when they transferred me. "I have evidence that Marcus Webb has been engaging in extramarital affairs with multiple partners and documenting these encounters on social media. Given that your company handles family finances and retirement planning, I thought you should be aware that one of your representatives might not embody the values you advertise." I didn't wait for a response. I just hung up and sent an anonymous email with screenshots of Marcus's most explicit messages from Sarah's group chat. By noon, I'd made similar calls about Lisa Chen's nursing job and Rebecca Stone's position at a local real estate agency. I wasn't lying or exaggerating. I was simply sharing factual information about their documented behavior with people who had a legitimate interest in knowing about it. My phone rang as I was driving back to the shop, Sarah's number. "Jack, what did you do to our bank accounts?" "I protected our assets," I said calmly. "Pete Hendricks advised me that it was necessary to prevent marital waste during divorce proceedings." "Divorce proceedings? Jack, we haven't even talked about—" "We talked about it last night. You made your position very clear." "I was drunk. I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're upset." The group chat messages weren't drunk texts, Sarah. The photos weren't angry mistakes. The 6 months of planning and laughing weren't momentary lapses in judgment. Silence on the other end of the line. "How much do you know?" she asked quietly. "Everything, every message, every photo, every plan, every joke at my expense, every lie you told me, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to be my wife while you were planning your next adventure with my friends. Jack, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. No, we can't." I pulled into the shop's parking lot. "You made your choice, Sarah. You chose your new life, your new friends, your new identity. I'm just making sure you get to live with the consequences." "What does that mean?" "It means you wanted to be free of me. Congratulations. You're about to be free of everything." I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in months, I had work to do that I actually enjoyed. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I ignored them all and focused on my meeting with Pete Hendricks. Pete's office was in a converted Victorian house on Main Street, all dark wood and leather furniture that was supposed to make clients feel like they were dealing with old money respectability. Pete himself was anything but old money. His father had been a mechanic like mine, but he'd worked his way through law school and built a solid practice handling small-town legal problems. "Jesus Christ, Jack," he said after reviewing the evidence I'd brought. This is really something. Something good or something bad. Something devastating. For them," he leaned back in his chair, "I've seen a lot of messy divorces, but this level of documentation, this level of premeditation, Sarah's lawyer is going to have nightmares." "What about Emma?" "She's 17, so she gets a say in custody arrangements. But given this evidence of your wife's behavior, and especially the fact that they were doing this in the family home." Pete shook his head. "Any judge is going to have serious concerns about Sarah's judgment and priorities. I don't want to hurt Emma. She's already going through enough. The best thing you can do for Emma is get her out of this toxic situation. Sarah's not just cheating on you, Jack. She's modeling destructive behavior for your daughter. That group chat shows a complete disregard for family stability and emotional health." Pete was right, but it didn't make me feel any better about the nuclear bomb I was about to drop on my family. "What's the timeline?" I asked. "I can file divorce papers tomorrow morning. Given the evidence, I can also request an emergency hearing for temporary custody and asset protection. We're talking about a week, maybe 2, before Sarah realizes how serious this is. She already knows it's serious. She just doesn't know how serious." Pete gathered the papers and photos into a neat stack. "Jack, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go this route? Once we file these papers, once this evidence becomes part of the court record, there's no going back. Your marriage is over, and everyone in town is going to know why." I thought about Sarah's words from the night before. "You can accept that I'm a grown woman with needs you can't meet, or you can get lost." "I'm sure," I said. I was walking back to my truck when my phone rang. Danny's number. Jack, we need to talk. No, we don't. Please, man, just give me 5 minutes to explain. Something in his voice made me pause. Not remorse. Danny had never been good at genuine emotion, but fear. Explain what? How you've been screwing my wife for 6 months while pretending to be my friend? How you've been laughing about it with other people? How you turned my marriage into your personal entertainment? It wasn't like that. What was it like, Danny? Look, Sarah was unhappy, okay? She needed someone to talk to, someone who understood what she was going through. It just kind of happened. For 6 months? It just kind of happened for 6 months? Relationships are complicated, Jack. You and Sarah grew apart. It happens to lots of couples. I almost laughed. So you were doing me a favor? Taking care of my unhappy wife while I was working to support her lifestyle? I was being a friend to both of you. By documenting your intimate encounters and sharing them with other people? Silence. Yeah, Danny, I know about the group chat. I know about the photos and videos. I know about all of it. Jack, please, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You're a pathetic middle-aged man who destroyed a 20-year friendship for some cheap thrills with a married woman. And now you're scared because you're starting to realize there might be consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that happen when people find out who you really are. I hung up and turned my phone off again. I had one more stop to make before going home. Riverside Tavern was the kind of bar where blue-collar guys went to complain about their jobs and their wives over cheap beer and peanuts. I'd been going there for 15 years, ever since Sarah started working late and I needed somewhere to go that wasn't my empty house. The owner, Mike Torino, had been a friend since high school. He played football while I worked on cars, but we'd stayed in touch over the years. Mike had never liked Sarah. He thought she was stuck up and materialistic, but he'd always been polite for my sake. Jack! Mike looked up from wiping down the bar. You look like heck. What's going on? I sat down on my usual stool and ordered a beer. Sarah's been cheating on me, with Danny Patterson and some other people. Mike's face darkened. That son of a witch. I never liked him either. Too slick, you know. Always had that used car salesman vibe. It gets worse. I told him about the group chat, the photos, the months of planning and mockery. By the time I finished, Mike was gripping his bar towel like he wanted to strangle someone with it. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said. They want to be free of boring old Jack. They want to live their exciting new lives without any consequences. They're about to get their wish. What does that mean? I pulled out my phone and showed Mike some of the group chat screenshots. His eyes got wider with each message. Holy crap, Jack. This is really bad. For them, I mean. It's about to get worse. What do you need from me? That was Mike, straight to the point, ready to help a friend without asking too many questions. I need you to do me a favor. Tomorrow night, I want you to have a little party here. Nothing fancy, just drinks and maybe some food. Invite the usual crowd, guys from the shop, some of the regulars. Make it seem casual. Okay, what's the occasion? I'm going to make an announcement about my divorce, about why it's happening, about who was involved. I met his eyes. And I'm going to share some evidence with people who deserve to know the truth. Mike nodded slowly. You want to make sure the whole town knows what they did? I want to make sure everyone understands exactly who they're dealing with. Sarah wants her new life. She can have it. But she's going to live it as the person she really is, not the person she's been pretending to be. What about Emma? Emma's going to learn that actions have consequences, that the people you trust matter, that loyalty isn't just a word. I finished my beer. And she's going to learn that her father isn't the pushover everyone thought he was. Mike grinned for the first time since I'd walked in. This is going to be something, isn't it? This is going to be justice, I said, finally. I drove home as the sun was setting, painting the sky the color of fire. Sarah's car was in the driveway, along with Danny's BMW and Rebecca's red Mustang. A little crisis meeting, probably. Trying to figure out how much trouble they were in, how much I knew, what their next move should be. They were about to find out that it was too late for next moves. The game was over, and I'd already won. I parked across the street and called Emma. Dad? Where are you? Mom's freaking out, and there are people here, and everyone's yelling. I'm outside, sweetheart. I want you to pack a bag and come stay with me tonight. We'll go to your Aunt Linda's. What's going on? Your mother and I are getting divorced, Emma, and there are some things you need to know about why. Is it because of what I said on TikTok? Because I was just angry and I didn't mean... No, baby. It's because of choices your mother made. Choices that had nothing to do with you. I'm scared, Dad. I know, but I promise you everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this, and when we do, we're going to be stronger than we were before. 10 minutes later, Emma came out of the house with a duffel bag, her eyes red from crying. She got in my truck without looking back at the house. Are you going to tell me what really happened? She asked as we drove away. Tomorrow, I said. Tonight, let's just focus on the fact that we're going to be okay. But as I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror, I knew that Sarah and her friends were about to learn the difference between being okay and getting what they deserved. The next morning brought the kind of autumn weather that makes you believe in fresh starts, crisp air, bright sunshine, and the smell of possibility in the wind. I dropped Emma off at school after a long talk over breakfast at her aunt's house. I still can't believe Mom did that, she said as we sat in my truck outside Jefferson High. I mean, I knew you guys were having problems, but I thought it was just normal married people stuff. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love, I said. The important thing is that you learn from their mistakes. Are you going to be okay, Dad? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had my dark hair and Sarah's green eyes, but there was something else there, something that was purely Emma, strength maybe, or just the resilience that comes from being 17 and believing the world can still make sense. I'm going to be better than okay, I told her. We both are. After dropping Emma off, I drove to the shop and spent the morning doing something I hadn't done in months, actually enjoying my work. There's something therapeutic about fixing things, about taking something broken and making it whole again. Too bad marriages weren't as straightforward as engines. Around noon, Pete called with an update. Divorce papers are filed, he said. Emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday morning. Sarah's going to be served this afternoon. What about the other stuff? Well, let's just say your phone calls yesterday were very effective. Marcus Webb is on administrative leave pending an investigation. Lisa Chen has been suspended from her nursing job. Rebecca Stone's real estate license is under review. And Danny? Danny's in a special kind of trouble. Turns out some of those group chat messages included discussions about his consulting work that involved accessing confidential client information and sharing it with Sarah for her marketing projects. That's a federal crime, Jack. I felt a moment of something that might have been satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by sadness. These had been my friends, people I'd trusted, people I'd cared about. The fact that destroying them felt so easy said something about who they really were. Jack, you still there? Yeah, I'm here, just thinking. About what? About how 20 years of friendship can disappear in 6 months of lies. I'm sorry, man, I really am. Don't be sorry, Pete. Be thorough. I hung up and went back to work. At 3 o'clock, my phone started ringing. Sarah, Danny, Rebecca, Marcus, Lisa, all of them trying to reach me, probably comparing notes about their various professional disasters. I let them all go to voicemail. At 5 o'clock, I closed the shop and drove to Riverside Tavern. Mike had done exactly what I'd asked. The place was packed with familiar faces, guys I'd known for years, people who'd been part of my life long before Sarah decided she needed something better. Jack, Tom Morrison, no relation, despite the name, raised his beer in greeting. Mike said you had some news to share. I do, I said, accepting the beer Mike handed me. But first, I want to thank you all for being here. You guys have been my friends through good times and bad. And that means more to me than you know. The crowd quieted down, sensing that something serious was coming. Most of you know that Sarah and I have been having some problems, I continued. What you don't know is why. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the bar's sound system. Mike had helped me set it up earlier. What I'm about to share with you isn't easy for me to talk about, and it's not going to be easy for you to hear. But I think you all deserve to know the truth about what's been happening in my life and who's been involved. I started with the group chat messages, reading them aloud in a steady voice that didn't betray the anger burning in my chest. The room got quieter with each message, until you could have heard a pin drop. Then I showed them the photos, not the explicit ones, but enough to make it clear what had been going on. Photos of Danny and Sarah at restaurants I couldn't afford. Photos of Marcus giving Sarah expensive jewelry. Photos of Rebecca and Lisa on shopping trips funded by money from our joint accounts. This has been going on for 6 months, I said when I finished. 6 months of lies, 6 months of betrayal, 6 months of my wife and my supposed friends turning my life into their entertainment. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Tom Morrison stood up. "Danny Patterson's a piece of crap," he said loudly. "Always thought so." "Sarah's worse," added Mike Torino. "At least Danny's just a cheating bastard. Sarah's the one who was supposed to love you." The room erupted in angry voices, everyone talking at once, expressing outrage and support in equal measure. These were good people, working people, people who understood loyalty and commitment and the value of keeping your word. "What are you going to do?" someone called out. "I'm going to give them exactly what they wanted," I said. "They wanted to be free of me? They're free. They wanted their new lives? They can have them. But they're going to live those lives as the people they really are, not the people they've been pretending to be." "What does that mean?" Tom asked. I smiled, and I could feel that it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "It means that by Monday morning, everyone in this town is going to know exactly who they're dealing with. Their employers already know. Marcus is on administrative leave, Lisa's suspended, Rebecca's license is under review. Their families are going to know when the divorce papers become public record. Their neighbors are going to know when the story hits the local Facebook groups." "You're going nuclear," Mike observed. "They went nuclear first," I replied. "I'm just making sure everyone understands the blast radius." The party continued for another 2 hours, but it had transformed from a simple gathering into something else. A rally, maybe, or a war council. These men had seen their friend betrayed by people he trusted, and they were ready to make sure it didn't happen without consequences. Around 9 o'clock, I was getting ready to leave when my phone rang. Emma's number. "Dad, you need to come home. Now." "What's wrong?" "Mom's here with Danny and Rebecca, and they're trying to take stuff from the house. They say they have a right to it because it's community property or something." "Are you safe?" "I'm in my room with the door locked, but they're really angry, Dad. Mom's screaming about the bank accounts, and Danny's talking about suing you for slander." "I'll be right there." I hung up and turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, it looks like Sarah and her friends have decided to escalate things. Anyone interested in making sure my daughter stays safe while I handle this situation?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Tom Morrison, Mike Torino, and 6 other guys stood up without hesitation. "Let's go," Tom said. "Time to show these people what real loyalty looks like." We arrived at my house in a convoy of pickup trucks and motorcycles that probably woke up half the neighborhood. Sarah's car was in the driveway, along with Danny's BMW and Rebecca's Mustang. Through the windows, I could see figures moving around, apparently loading items into boxes. "Emma," I called as we walked up to the front door. "It's Dad! You can come out now!" The front door opened, and Sarah appeared, her face flushed with anger and wine. Behind her, I could see Danny and Rebecca, both looking significantly less confident than they had a few hours ago. "You can't bring these people here," Sarah said, gesturing at my friends. "This is still my house, too." "Actually, it's not," I said, pulling out a folded paper. "As of this afternoon, you've been served with divorce papers and a restraining order. You're not supposed to be here without supervision." "That's BS, and you know it." "Danny," I called past Sarah, "you might want to check your voicemail. I think the FBI has some questions about your consulting work and those confidential client files you've been sharing." Danny's face went white. "You son of a witch." "Rebecca," I continued, "how's the real estate business? Still have your license, or did the state board decide that documenting extramarital affairs on social media isn't compatible with professional ethics?" Rebecca pushed past Sarah and Danny, her eyes blazing. "You're destroying people's lives, Jack. Over what? Because your wife finally found some happiness?" "I'm not destroying anything," I said calmly. "I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. You destroyed your own lives when you decided to turn mine into a game." Tom Morrison stepped forward. "Ladies, gentlemen, I think it's time for you to leave. Jack's been more than patient, but his daughter's scared and you're trespassing." "We have a right to be here," Sarah insisted. "No," said a new voice from behind us. "You don't?" We all turned to see a police officer walking up the driveway. Officer Martinez. I'd fixed his patrol car a few times over the years. "Evening, Jack. Got a call about a domestic disturbance. No disturbance, Officer Martinez. Just some people who are violating a restraining order." Martinez looked at Sarah, Danny, and Rebecca. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification, and I'm going to need you to explain why you're at this residence when there's a court order saying you're not supposed to be here." What followed was 20 minutes of the most satisfying law enforcement interaction I'd ever witnessed. Sarah tried to argue, Danny tried to charm his way out of trouble, and Rebecca threatened to call her lawyer. None of it worked. In the end, they were escorted off the property with a warning that any further violations would result in arrest. The boxes they'd packed were left behind, their contents to be sorted out through proper legal channels. After they left, I stood in my driveway with my friends, looking at the house I'd worked so hard to build and maintain. Emma came out and hugged me tightly. "Are they coming back?" she asked. "Not tonight," I said, "and after Monday's hearing, probably not ever." "Good," she said fiercely. "I can't believe I ever defended her." Tom Morrison clapped me on the shoulder. "Heck of a thing, Jack, but you handled it right." "It's not over yet," I said. "Monday's hearing is going to be the real show." "You need us there for moral support?" Mike asked. "No," I said, looking at my daughter and thinking about the evidence Pete had compiled. "I think I've got this handled." As my friends drove away and Emma and I went inside to assess the damage from Sarah's attempted looting expedition, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, new attempts by Sarah and her allies to rewrite history and avoid consequences. But tonight, in my own house with my daughter safe beside me, I finally felt like I was winning. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of bitter wind that cuts through even the heaviest jacket. I stood outside the courthouse in my best suit, the same one I'd worn to my wedding 20 years ago, watching Sarah and her lawyer climb the steps ahead of me. She looked different somehow, smaller. The confidence and arrogance that had carried her through our confrontation had been replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Danny wasn't with her, which made sense given that he was probably dealing with his own legal problems by now. "You ready for this?" Pete asked, joining me at the bottom of the steps. "I've been ready for months," I said. "I just didn't know it." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wood paneling that had seen better days and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. Judge Patricia Hawkins presided, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of human foolishness and wasn't impressed by any of it. Sarah's lawyer, David Chen, no relation to Lisa, thankfully, was everything I'd expected. Expensive suit, perfect hair, and the kind of smooth confidence that comes from never having to work with your hands for a living. He probably charged more per hour than I made in a week. "Your Honor," Chen began, "my client is the victim of a vindictive husband who has chosen to respond to marital difficulties by attempting to destroy her career and reputation. Mr. Morrison has engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment that includes—" "Mr. Chen," Judge Hawkins interrupted, "I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties. Perhaps we should start with the facts rather than the rhetoric." Pete stood up, and I felt a surge of confidence. He might not have David Chen's polish, but he had something better: the truth. "Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Mrs. Morrison engaged in multiple extramarital affairs over a 6-month period, documented these affairs extensively on social media, and used marital assets to fund activities related to these relationships. Mr. Morrison only became aware of the extent of his wife's behavior when she explicitly told him about it and demanded that he accept the situation or leave." "That's not what happened," Sarah said, half rising from her seat. "Mrs. Morrison," Judge Hawkins said sharply, "you'll have your chance to speak. Right now, I'm listening to the evidence." Pete opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, screenshots of a group chat called Sarah's Liberation Squad, in which Mrs. Morrison and her co-conspirators documented their activities and made explicit plans to deceive Mr. Morrison." Judge Hawkins took the folder and began reading. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her eyebrows rise slightly as she worked through the pages. "This group chat," she said finally, "includes intimate photos taken in the marital home?" "Yes, Your Honor. In the bedroom Mr. Morrison shared with his wife, often while he was at work supporting the family. And financial records showing that Mrs. Morrison used joint credit cards to pay for hotels, restaurants, and gifts related to these relationships? Yes, Your Honor. Over $4,000 in the past 6 months alone." Judge Hawkins turned to David Chen. "Mr. Chen, how does your client respond to this evidence?" Chen stood up, but for the first time since we'd entered the courtroom, He looked uncertain. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that the marriage was troubled and that she may have made some poor choices. However, Mr. Morrison's response has been disproportionate and vindictive. He has— Mr. Chen, the judge interrupted again, I'm not interested in your client's opinion of her husband's response. I'm interested in whether she can dispute the factual accuracy of this evidence. Sarah whispered something to her lawyer, who nodded and sat down. We cannot dispute the accuracy of the evidence, Your Honor. Judge Hawkins closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Mrs. Morrison, I want to make sure I understand the situation. You engaged in multiple extramarital relationships. You documented these relationships extensively. You used marital funds to support these activities. And you conducted some of these activities in the home you shared with your husband and minor daughter? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. And when your husband discovered this behavior, you told him to accept it or leave. I was angry, Your Honor. I said things I didn't mean. Mrs. Morrison, did you or did you not create and participate in a social media group for the express purpose of documenting and discussing your extramarital activities? Sarah looked at her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. And did this group include individuals who were supposed to be friends of your husband? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hawkins leaned back in her chair and was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of decades on the bench. Mrs. Morrison, in 23 years of hearing divorce cases, I have rarely seen such a deliberate and systematic betrayal of marital trust. You didn't simply have an affair. You orchestrated a campaign of humiliation against your husband while using his financial support to fund your activities. Your Honor, David Chen tried to interrupt. I'm not finished, Mr. Chen. Judge Hawkins' voice could have cut glass. Mrs. Morrison, you involved multiple individuals in this campaign. You documented it extensively, and you conducted these activities in your family home while your minor daughter was present. This isn't simply adultery. This is emotional misuse on a scale that I find genuinely disturbing. Sarah was crying now, but Judge Hawkins wasn't finished. Furthermore, your demand that your husband accept it or leave demonstrates a complete disregard for the basic principles of marriage, family stability, and human decency. You treated your marriage like a game and your husband like a fool. The judge turned to Pete. Mr. Hendricks, what is your client seeking in terms of asset distribution and custody? Pete stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison is seeking primary custody of the minor child, the family home, his business assets, and 50% of remaining marital assets after accounting for Mrs. Morrison's wasteful spending. And Mrs. Morrison's position? David Chen stood up reluctantly. Your Honor, given the circumstances, my client is willing to accept a reasonable settlement that allows both parties to move forward. Judge Hawkins almost smiled. How generous of her. She spent the next 10 minutes outlining her decision. I got everything Pete had asked for and more. Primary custody of Emma, with Sarah getting supervised visitation pending a psychological evaluation. The house, the shop, and all business assets. Sarah would be responsible for her own debts, including the credit card charges related to her affairs. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Hawkins said in closing, I want you to understand something. Your husband didn't destroy your life. You did. Every consequence you're facing is the direct result of choices you made. Mr. Morrison simply refused to pretend those choices didn't matter. As we left the courthouse, Sarah tried to approach me in the parking lot. Jack, please, can we talk? Can we try to work something out? I looked at the woman I'd been married to for 20 years. The mother of my daughter. The person I'd once thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. She looked broken, desperate. Nothing like the confident woman who'd told me to get lost just a few days ago. Sarah, I said quietly, you told me to get lost because your friends were better than me in every way. You got your wish. Now you get to find out how much better they really are. They won't even talk to me now, she said, tears streaming down her face. Danny won't return my calls. Rebecca says it's too complicated. Marcus is dealing with his own problems. That's what happens when you build relationships on betraying other people, I said. Eventually, everyone figures out what kind of person you really are. I started to walk away, then turned back. Sarah, I want you to know something. I loved you. For 20 years, I loved you completely and honestly. I worked 60-hour weeks to give you the life you wanted. I sacrificed my own dreams to support yours. I would have done anything for you." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse," I continued. "I'm telling you this so you understand what you threw away. Not just a marriage, a man who would have loved you forever if you'd just been honest with me. Is there any chance?" "No," I said firmly. "There's no chance. You made your choice and now you get to live with it." I walked to my truck where Emma was waiting for me. She'd asked to come to the hearing to see how it ended. "How do you feel, Dad?" she asked as we drove away. I thought about it for a moment. "I feel free," I said finally. "For the first time in months, I feel completely free. What happens now?" "Now we go home, and we start building the life we actually want instead of the life we thought we were supposed to have. Will Mom be okay?" "Your mother is going to have to figure out how to be okay on her own," I said. "That's what she wanted, and that's what she's going to get." We drove home through the gray November afternoon, past the courthouse where my marriage had officially ended, past the neighborhoods where everyone would soon know exactly what had happened and why. By evening, the story would be all over social media. By tomorrow, Sarah and her co-conspirators would be the talk of the town. But for the first time in months, that didn't bother me. Let people talk. Let them know what really happened. Let them understand the difference between being a victim and being a fool. I'd been a victim of betrayal, but I'd refused to be a fool about it. And in the end, that had made all the difference. As we pulled into our driveway, my driveway now, Emma looked over at me and smiled. "I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for yourself, for not letting them get away with it." "I'm proud of us," I said. "We're going to be okay, Emma. Better than okay." And for the first time in a very long time, I actually believed it. 6 months later, I got a call from Mike Torino. Sarah had moved to another state where she was working as a receptionist and living in a studio apartment. Danny was facing federal charges and had lost his house. Rebecca's real estate license had been permanently revoked. Marcus was working at a call center and driving a 15-year-old Honda. "Do you ever feel bad about it?" Mike asked. "About how hard they fell?" I thought about it while I watched Emma working on her college applications at the kitchen table, about the thriving business I'd built, about the peace I'd found in my own life. "No," I said finally. "I feel grateful." "Grateful?" "Grateful that I finally learned the difference between loyalty and stupidity. Grateful that Emma got to see what happens when you stand up for yourself. Grateful that I'm not spending the rest of my life pretending to be happy with people who thought I was a joke." "Fair enough," Mike said. "You want to come down to the bar tonight? Tom Morrison's buying drinks for everyone." "I'll be there," I said, right after I helped my daughter with her essay about overcoming adversity. I hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen. Really looked at it. The same cabinets I'd installed with my own hands, the same refrigerator covered with Emma's achievements, the same morning sunlight streaming through windows I'd cleaned myself. But everything was different now. The house felt like home again instead of a prison. The silence felt peaceful instead of tense. The future felt like something to look forward to instead of something to endure. Sarah had been right about one thing. I was just a guy who fixed cars for a living, who considered Applebee's fine dining, who worked with his hands instead of his mind. But I was also a man who kept his word, who honored his commitments, who understood the value of loyalty and the cost of betrayal. And in the end, that had been enough. More than enough.